And welcome back to Rome, everyone. We're here on this time we've moved up to the roof of the FAO building. And I'm here with Oliver Oliveros from the Agroecology Coalition. Hi, Oliver.
Hi, how are you doing, Oliver? Another Oliver.
The Olivers reunite. So, Oliver from the regenerative movement and Oliver from the agroecology movement.
Exactly.
And we're both united under common goals, common visions.
Of transforming food systems through agroecology. So your group is a part of the coalition. Absolutely, one of the early members, right?
We are one of the early members.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's fantastic.
And so the Agroecology Coalition is based here in Rome, which is the city of food, really.
City of food, absolutely. That's why we're here for. And we really wanted to take advantage of, what the city represents in terms of food and agriculture policy conversations, and take advantage of our presence here. And that's the reason why the coalition is based here. Take advantage of all the conversations happening around, try to link with people, like-minded people, and hopefully an area to influence conversations around agroecology and sustainable food systems transformation.
And so here at the FAO, agroecology has been recognized with 13 principles.
Oh, well, absolutely. I mean, it's more of the 10 elements of agroecology, the language that FAO uses, where 197 member states has approved several years ago, was the 10 elements of agroecology. And these 10 elements of agroecology are fully aligned with the 13 principles of agroecology as enshrined in the high-level panel of experts report of the Committee on Food Security, the CFS. So these two are the anchor of the coalition. This is sort of like, I always say, this is our compass that guides our work, the way we want to go. As long as, we are led by these principles, we should be moving in the right direction, so to speak.
As we were just discussing now, our People's Food Summit was based on creating an event that was an alternative to the United Nations Food Systems Summit that happened in 2021 in New York. And we were part of the NGOs that boycotted this summit because the presidency was held by the people that were behind the agricultural green revolution in Africa. And your coalition, you're working within this Food Systems Summit. Could you explain the work you're doing in promoting agroecology in this space? What are you trying to achieve?
Well, I think we're trying to make a point of that when you talk about systems. Probably the Food Systems Summit is one of the very few, if not the only, UN labeled summit, even if it's a UN Secretary General's summit, where you have the word system in it. And I think that's a very good entry point to drive home the point that we need to think systems, we need to think holistic, and we need to think about people. So the Food Systems Summit initially was framed as a people summit, that's one. And what is also framed as a system summit. And when you talk about people, when you talk about systems, I mean, agroecology comes to mind. And for me and for us within the coalition, it's no-brainer that we need to, for lack of a better word, ride on that summit to be able to drive home the point that if we want to transform our food systems, we really need to make sure that we're systems thinking and that we are looking at the welfare of the people and the planet as well.
You have united now many different stakeholders, so NGOs, countries, farmer organizations, and research institutions.
Right.
And you're organizing work groups. So
Yes.
you're a very young coalition. You started maybe a year ago.
Yeah, almost 2 years. Almost 2 years ago. The coalition is currently composed of 47 member states and 140 and still growing organizations, from research to civil society to academia, grassroots movement and whatnot. And the work of the coalition is really, we wanted to focus on 3 work streams or 3 thematic areas. One really is to facilitating the co-creation and exchange of knowledge on agroecology. And knowledge meaning both a scientific but also an equally important knowledge that is coming from the ground. the practices that grassroots frontline actors on food systems are doing, and even what indigenous groups, indigenous peoples have been doing since time immemorial. So the idea there is for the coalition to facilitate exchange and co-creation of knowledge on agroecology. The second one is to use that body of knowledge as sort of like an evidence to push for increased investments in agroecology. Let's face it, agroecology has received a lot of attention, and it has been, it has been recognized or continuously growing in terms of attraction. But we feel that the level of investments that are pouring on agroecology is not commensurate to the level of recognition that it is having now, or the level of recognition that it deserves. So we really think that we need to push donors, public and private, to really invest more on agroecology. That's the second work stream. The third work stream is really to look at having more political engagement and political will and support towards agroecological transformation, and using spaces like the CFS, the Food Systems Summit, the 3 Rio Conventions on Climate, Biodiversity and Desertification as an entry point to really push the agroecology agenda, saying that through agroecology you're able to address your climate, biodiversity, and land targets. And then, of course, I think we really need to anchor conversations around agroecology on health and nutrition as well, because I mean, healthy food, healthy planet, right? So that's also one of the things that that gains the following from the common people, from the consumers, and from the general public in general. So we're trying to address those 3 work streams. We're working along those 3 work streams insofar as the coalition is concerned.
There are huge investments going into new markets such as Africa, and we're seeing large corporations, large seed companies, large agrochemical corporations wanting to push products that, if we're talking about agroecology, we're talking about traditional food systems, traditional farming systems, traditional seeds.
Right.
And the biggest investors aren't talking about investing in those traditional systems, but into more, this American products, Chinese products, big organizations such as AFSA Africa, for instance. They're really calling out. They're really sounding the alarm bell on corporate takeover of food systems.
No, absolutely. I think we really need to be vigilant around this. There's very much susceptibility to greenwashing, and we all know that, right? And I think it's really important to keep the agroecological principles. We really need to uphold those principles, because that's our compass. We know that, if you want to be truly agroecological and true food systems transformation in a sustainable way, you need to look at principles around equity, fairness, governance, diversity, healthy soil, healthy environment, etc. So you really need to make sure that we are looking at all these interventions with those 13 principles as our lens. Otherwise, we could easily sort of like get swayed by, let's face it, I mean, private sector has so much funds going towards marketing and branding. So there's much more empowered and into that part. So our only I think our only ammunition against that is being true to our principles and making sure that we know our principles well. And these are, the principles that guide the work of the coalition. And that's essentially the 13 principles of agroecology. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much, Oliver. Just before we leave off, so for anyone who wants to join the coalition and take part, what are the benefits? Why join?
Well, first and foremost, you will be, engaging with cool people, with like-minded people who are really keen on addressing and pushing for sustainable food systems through agroecology. And it's not only the people that you would normally work with, because if you are from the civil society group, the tendency is to camp with the civil society groups. This, you would be able to interact with people from different angles, from research, from philanthropy, to donor, to private sector, small and medium enterprises. And they're all talking agroecology from where they're sitting. So that enriches your perspective insofar as agroecology is concerned. It will allow you also to learn from what they're learning. What are the challenges of scaling agroecology? So that will give you some insights on the challenges that they're facing and how you are able to overcome that, hopefully. And then of course there are several things that we're lining up as well in terms of those different work streams that I mentioned, in terms of funding, in terms of policy conversations. So we wanted to sort of like present agroecology as a platform where members are able to not only identify sources of funding, but more importantly, to influence how funding can be made by engaging in conversations with donors, both public and private, but also for those who are engaging in policy conversations from global to regional and at the national level as well.
Oliver, thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Oliver.
Thank you.
Yep, fantastic.
Okay,
Thank you.
Next up, a presentation from Patrick Worms, the president of the International Union for Agroforestry.
Oliver, your audience might remember that I'm really into nature-based solutions, right? I'm an agroforester. I work as a science policy advisor for a big research organization called World Agroforestry. I am the president of something called the International Union of Agroforestry, and I helped set up, and I'm still the vice president of the European Agroforestry Federation. And the reason I do that is not only because it's really fun to watch things grow, but also because watching things grow well is such a giant help in managing the consequences of our carbon greed. Because let's face it, we all love our carbon, don't we? So perhaps I can start by explaining what I mean by this and how important this is, and just launch into a presentation. How about that? Buffering the climate is what we've got to play at, right? And the reason we've got to play at that is because we have been so absolutely lousy at doing anything about our carbon emissions. We've been talking about it since the 1990s. We've realized this was a problem since the 1860s. But while we've talked about it, we've done very, very little to stop putting long-lived greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. And the reason for that, as this chart shows, is everybody's getting on the fossil fuel bandwagon because fossil fuels are great. They heat your house, they give you food, they allow you to travel, they give you entertainment, they make life a place of pleasure and comfort that the kings of yore might never have noticed. But of course, what we know here is that this is a massive problem. And it's a problem that leads, in the European context, to all of the disasters that seem to have come hot on the heels one after another this summer. The floods in Greece, for example, followed soon after by the floods in Libya. The various forest fires that have been striking the Mediterranean from Portugal in the west to Cyprus in the east. The storms. And the only good picture I found was a picture from 2009, just to remind us that this is not a new problem. We've known that these issues are going to be massive issues, and we've known it for a long time. We also know that agriculture, so often portrayed as a solution to these issues, is actually part of the problem, right? Because it consumes an enormous amount of land and water, and it employs a huge number of people, and it generates a large number of greenhouse gases, all while generating less than 5% of global wealth. Yes, it's the global wealth that feeds our bodies, so it's the global wealth that we love having in the fridge and on the dinner table, but it is nevertheless a broken industry. And it's a broken industry that has a direct impact on the planet. When we think of land degradation, for example, we tend to think of areas like the ones in Africa, areas that look like this, areas that are desertified and in which we expect people to have difficulty feeding themselves. But that would be mistaken, because in practice, land degradation is affecting every part of the planet, including the rich soils of the American Midwest, the Brazilian Cerrado, the Chinese floodplain, and Ukraine. This is what that looks like, that kind of land degradation. It's a big modern farming system, but the guy plowed his land and prepared his seedbed just before there was some wind and the soil is blowing away. Or he planted his crops and wanted a little bit of rain to harvest his crops, but with climate change, the rain increasingly turns into storms, and so your soil is being washed away. And when you look at how much impact that has on the climate itself, you come up with figures that range from 20 to 30%, sometimes even 40%, depending on how you do your calculations. It's difficult to understand exactly how much carbon agriculture is putting into the air, but we all agree it's a lot. The beautiful news is none of that is necessary. We can grow all the food we need while locking down carbon and while fixing our deleterious impacts on soils. We can fix this. And fixing it is not terribly complicated. You don't need big tractors and GMOs and the latest chemistry and all of that stuff. You only need two things: the management of trees and the management of livestock. And sometimes that means the management of livestock in trees. So let's see what that means. Let's see what these good agricultural systems look like. They boil down into four categories. The so-called silvopastoral systems. Those are the systems where you mix livestock with trees. And clockwise from top left, what you have here are examples from Poland, where this guy is running milch cows under his apple orchard. From Finland, where the reindeer are munching on the lichen in the winter. From Burkina Faso, where the cattle are eating the stover, the leftover material from the crops, under these shea trees, and we all use shea either in our beauty products or in our chocolate. There's a lot of shea in chocolate. And at the bottom left, the Pata Negra pigs that are running in the cork oak savannas of Portugal. So all of these systems are called silvopastoral because they are pastured animals under trees. Then you have the silvo-arable systems. Arable means farming and silvo means trees, so logically enough, these are the systems where you put trees in farmlands. And again, from clockwise from top left, what you have are examples of a maize field in Zambia with trees that are legumes. They fix nitrogen, so they provide fertilizer to the maize. At the top right, you have an example of an energy crop, that coppice tree on the right, in alleys in England. At the bottom right, you have an agroforestry system in Sri Lanka, where the agroforestry component are the small shrubby things and the crop are the big tall things, the coconuts. And at the bottom left, you have a silvo-arable system with wheat and poplars in France. What they all have in common is that the trees are helping the crops to grow and protect them from extreme weather, and the crops help the trees to grow. And so suddenly you have two different things growing from your land that you can sell. The third and the most important the most effective of these agricultural systems are the polycultures. They are also the most difficult to make work in the modern world, because instead of growing one crop or one crop and one tree, you're growing 17 or 20 different things on a given plot of land. It's really, really, really complex. It's really, really, really effective in terms of using ecosystem services to put carbon in the soil, to get biodiversity back, and to grow a lot of high quality stuff. But it's really, really difficult to make work in a market system, because the guy who's turning up with his crop to collect your, your bananas is not going to be interested in your vanilla. So in here, from the top left, we have the chaga gardens on the slopes of Mount Kilimanjaro in Tanzania. We have a modern oil palm agroforestry system in Brazil. At the bottom right, we have a modern keyline system in New York State. And at the bottom left, we have a coffee, banana, vanilla, jatropha, and I forget what else, system in Uganda. All of these systems are really, really impactful. And those amongst your listeners who understand permaculture will recognize that permaculture resembles a lot like this. Permaculture is a form of polyculture, which is ideally adapted to the production of high-value goods, such as fruits and vegetables. Now, the fourth system, I don't have an illustration for because it would get us off into a beautiful rabbit hole, but we don't have the time, and those are the grasslands. Grasslands, well managed, are a crucial part of managing the planet. But what we have now is a framework, a mental framework to understand what we can do. And if we look at how powerful they are, we can simply look at these charts. Here, for example, is the measured sequestration rate, the amount of carbon being locked down by a poplar agroforestry system on a so-called 30-year rotation. You let your trees grow for 30 years, you cut them, you plant them again. And what you see is that as the trees grow, they capture a huge amount of carbon. They're putting carbon in the soil and they're capturing carbon in their bodies, in their wood. If then you turn that poplar into timber to build a house, that carbon is locked away for decades, maybe centuries. Of course, if you turn it into toilet paper, that carbon goes back into the atmosphere soon enough as the toilet paper runs away in a sewage plant. But you already see the idea of how trees are helping to capture down carbon. And so if you look at at what that could give if you do it at scale, and this is a simple system. It's one type of tree, poplars, planted in one type of farming system, arable. And this is the annual increment in carbon it could lock down year after year after year. It varies between 150 and 250 million tons of CO2, and that's just for the UK. And the UK is just one small island on the size of this planet. That gives you some idea of the potential that agroforestry has. And how widely could you spread agroforestry? How big could it be? Well, just look at this map. What it does is it shows you the density of tree cover on agricultural lands across Europe. Red means there is no trees. You really have to squint to see a little bit of green in southern Italy, in southern Spain and Portugal, in the mountainous area of central France. Each and every one of these fields could benefit from having trees on them. And I don't just mean that they could benefit us, the wider public, by helping to draw down carbon. I mean that they could benefit the farmers themselves, because trees help farming work better. And what I'm going to do now is just explain very simply why trees are so important. And when you think about it, it's obvious. For example, trees have much deeper roots than crops. That means that they can suck up nutrients from deep in the soil, build their bodies and their leaves with it. And then in winter, in autumn, when the leaves fall down and rot, the nutrients that the tree pumped from deep in the soil is available at the surface of the field and therefore becomes available to crops. So having a tree in your field is like having a fertilizer factory in your field. Then, especially as we get these increasing droughts and these increasing storms, trees are really good at buffering things. We all know that it's wetter and cooler under a tree when there's a drought. What we may not realize is that trees are giant rain-catching devices. When there's a storm, all that water runs along the branches, the trunk, and the roots of the trees and gets stored underground instead of rushing off in a big sheet into the nearest river. So it's a flood control measure too. And we've measured that at scale. And we've noticed that it's when you have this intermediate tree density, not too many trees as in a forest or not too few trees as in a degraded landscape, that you have the most water recharge in the ground. And that's what this chart shows. The red arrow pointing up is the amount of water rainwater that's intercepted and transpired again by the plants. And obviously, the more trees you have, the more of this transpiration you have. The yellow arrow pointing up is the amount of evaporation you have from the soil. And obviously, the fewer trees you have, the more evaporation you have. The surface runoff, the orange arrow pointing to the left, shows that the less trees you have, the less obstacles you have to water simply running away, and you have more and more water running off. What's interesting to us, because we've got all these aquifers that are being pumped dry by our farming system, is how we can encourage most of them, the maximum amount of that water to come back down. And that's the blue arrow pointing down. In the forests, you don't have a lot of water recharge because the trees use up all the water and transpire it again. In the degraded land, you don't have a lot of recharge because it mostly evaporates away or runs off into the river. But in the intermediate tree cover land, the agroforestry landscapes, that's where you maximize groundwater recharge, right? It also helps deal with the pollution of fertilizers. A big problem that you have in places like the US or Europe, or now increasingly Brazil, is that excess fertilizer runs off into the rivers or into the groundwater supplies, and it's difficult to get rid of. It's a pollutant that's bad in drinking water, so it's bad for babies and pregnant women. It's just a bit of a hassle. And the best way of getting rid of it is to use less of it. The second best way of getting rid of it is to have an agroforestry system. Because if you look at the little drawing at the bottom in the agroforestry system, the tree roots, go under the crop roots, and all the fertilizer that the crops didn't use gets absorbed by the trees. And that's why you find in the blue bar that the agroforestry system has much less leaching of nitrogen than the red bar, which is the pure agricultural system. I told you a while ago that the crops protect the trees. Well, here's an example. Here's what happens when you do real hard science in agroforestry. You dig all around your tree and you count the number of rootlets. And that gives you this kind of graph. On the left, you have a graph that shows you the density, the root density, meaning the meters of rootlets per cubic meter of soil by depth. The deeper you go, the fewer roots you have. In the agroforestry system on the right, most of the rootlets are between 1.5 and 3 meters down, because close to the surface, there's no room. The crop roots are using it. So when you have a drought in the forestry system, the tree stops growing. There's no more water. In the agroforestry system, the tree keeps growing because down deep at 1.5, 2 meters, there's still water even when there's a drought near the surface. And it's because of all of these impacts, and because they are so ignored, that when I see a picture like this, I go, good Lord, we have to educate our farmers. Because this picture, which comes from the website of a big agrochemical company, is supposed to suggest how bounteous, how productive your field is going to be if you use their products. Instead, once you understand how agroecosystems work, you see a late summer landscape in, an early summer landscape in Europe, probably 14 to 16 hours of sunlight, which is not used. There's no photosynthesis. It rains in the summer in Europe. That water is not used either. At least in this system, when you harvest your arable crops, you continue using sun and water. And that's why the land equivalency ratio, the amount of land that you need to have the same productivity as 1 hectare of agroforestry by monocropping your crops and by monocropping your forest, is always larger than what you get in agroforestry. And that's raw cash. Farmers make more money from agroforestry. Now, why is that so useful from a climate change perspective? It's because incentives make the world go round. Farmers are not going to plant trees if it's going to cost them money. But we want farmers to plant trees, not only because of the carbon that locks down, but also because good management is a protection against climate change. Here is a fire that killed over 100 people in Portugal a few years ago. It burned in land that was abandoned and not managed. These lands, which were just 10 kilometers away, which are managed as a silvopastoral system, when the fire turns up there, nothing much happens. It's only the grass that burns. The trees don't burn because there's no shrubs. There's no fuel on the ground. Here's what happened in that French storm I told you about. So many trees were destroyed by the winds that they had become valueless. The sawmills couldn't keep up. This is a picture taken of an agroforestry system, a silvo-arable system, in the same area the next summer, 6 months later. As you'll notice, there's not a single gap in those tree lines. Why? The trees have much deeper roots. They are squatter. They can resist the wind, which a plantation can't. And these kind of landscapes can easily disappear if you remember what our ancestors did, which is to plant hedges. Because hedges diminish wind speeds. They capture sediment that's flying across the air. They keep the soil in place. And the same thing happens for this kind of erosion. All you have to do is use key lines to help them to slow down the water and help the water deposit its sediments. Now, do you want to take my word for it? No. Take the word of the IPCC, the International Panel on Climate Change. Because what the IPCC is saying is that these principles, which all together are known as agroecology, farming that works with natural processes, they rock. They support food security, nutrition, health, well-being, livelihoods, biodiversity, sustainability, and ecosystem services. And then if you're a scientist, you love these two words in parentheses there, high confidence. High confidence simply means they've looked at thousands of scientific papers, and the consensus is overwhelming that this works. But that then leads us to a question. If this is the future, why does the world look like this more and more? Well, there's a number of reasons. One is, yes, we're clever animals, but we still like to divide things up into smaller bits and pieces to manage them. So we've got ministries of agriculture and ministries of forestry and ministries of environment and ministries of finance. But the world doesn't look like that. In the world, all these bits and pieces are mixed up, and the nutrients, the water, the genes, everything flows. It's a life dynamic system. The next problem we have, especially in Europe, is labor is really expensive, social security costs and all the extra income taxes that people have to pay. But borrowing money is cheap. Even today, when interest rates are much higher than they were a couple of years ago, it's still much, much cheaper to borrow money to buy a tractor than to pay some workers. Then we all love progress, right? We don't like the old ways. But the old ways mixed up the shops and the producers and the housing and the factories, whereas the new ways put everything into their own little corner. Factories over here, education over there, housing here, all connected by roads needing petrol, gas, and cars. And by the way, this wasn't just an issue for the capitalist world, this was an issue for the communist world as well. This is a poster from Soviet times showing how great Soviet agriculture is. There's no green in it, there's no animals in it, there's just a fertilizer factory and an army of tractors marching proudly into the future. Then another reason is, yes, we are clever animals, but even as adults, we sometimes behave like toddlers. You know what it's like? Those of you who have children know that when they are 4 or 5 years old and you put the presents at Christmas under the tree and they open that present, they will not play with their old toys evermore. They will just play with their new present. They forget what they already have. And we were the same. We found these wonderful tools, fertilizers, pesticides, mechanized agriculture. These are powerful tools. Just imagine how powerful they are. You have a pest problem, you spray something, it's gone. For thousands of years, pest problems meant lower crops. Sometimes they meant famine. Suddenly, all you had to do was spray a cheap chemical on it, and it's gone. Fertilizer. Just imagine the labor of carrying fertilizer in the form of manure around and growing your food. Now, all you have to do is pour it out of a bag. These are extraordinarily powerful tools. And I'm glad we have them. But we behave like toddlers. We forgot the old tools we have. And that's leading to problems. It's also leading to a problem of influence. These tools are cheap, but because they work so well, you can sell them to hundreds of millions of farmers around the world. So you make a huge pile of cash. Whereas advising people to manage their trees and their livestock better, that makes less cash. And that means with all of that cash that they have, they can do more marketing, they can do more lobbying, they can buy more influence, they can do more research, and their market is growing year after year after year. And it's leading to insidious things like the feed the world thing. Oh my God, we've got climate change and our populations are growing. We need to grow 70% more food to feed everybody or we'll have mass starvation. And what that means is we need to increase global calorie production. So we can only do that really on large farms with big tractors and specialized seeds and better fertilizers. In other words, we have a discourse that is geared to kicking small farmers off the land, to kicking agroecology of the land, and to replace it with more of the same, on the mistaken, or at least bizarre assumption that you can fix the problem of modern agriculture by doing more modern agriculture. However, even with all of that, they are losing. They are losing. And the reason they are losing is because farmers are not stupid. Farmers know trees are important. And already today, we know that over 40% of all agricultural land on the planet has more than 10% tree cover, and that's rising year after year. Yes, it's rising slowly, but it is rising, not diminishing. And again, the scientists, they know it too. If in agriculture, you want to do something to boost mitigation and adaptation and reduce desertification and reduce land degradation and increase food security, what can you do apart from increased food productivity, which is like asking mommy for more pocket money? What you can do is use agroforestry. It's the cheapest and most effective tool we have at our disposal. I didn't talk about grazing, but improved grazing management delivers almost as well. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why I am an optimist. It is because not only do we have the tools that we need to manage our agro-ecosystems suck down carbon and make them more resilient to the increasingly dire weather conditions we are getting. But these tools are either cheap or they make farmers money. And the only reason they're not spreading more rapidly is because we live in an environment in which the people who dominate the discourse are the people who sell the chemicals. But even they are beginning to realize that simply more chemicals is not going to be enough. So we are at the cusp of a revolution in agroecology, in the management of our landscapes. And I'm convinced that by the time my children reach my age, the farming landscapes of the world will look completely different to what they look like today. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Patrick Worms, our dear friend, for that tremendous presentation on agroforestry. And always staying very European, now we're going to meet a German in Portugal, Mr. Philip Berker from Climate Farmers. Climate Farmers seeks to scale up the transitioning of conventional systems to regenerative organic. Philip, the floor is yours.
Nice. Yeah, pleasure to be here, everybody. It's kind of a first time that I'm actually participating in a conference from the village where it all started for me. So in case you're wondering what the weird background is, I'm sitting in the Serra da Lusa mountain range in central Portugal, in a formerly abandoned village, as you can see around me. We basically bought the village here and about 8 hectares of land in 2017. And that is what got me on the path towards regenerative agriculture, got me interested in it. And then in 2019, I did a 1-year pilgrimage visiting all the regenerative farmers I could find in Western Europe. Wasn't that many at that point, it was 60 farmers. And I stayed and worked with those farmers. And from those conversations with the farmers, developed the idea of Climate Farmers, which I founded together with my co-founder Ivo Degen in summer of 2020. And what I will be sharing with you here is the theory of change that we're having. So it's basically a little bit distilled as much as possible into a 5 to 10 minute conversation, the learnings that we have made in working with farmers across Europe and supporting them in the transition to regenerative agriculture. So I think seeing that you're all here in this conference, I'm assuming we can all agree on this one. The current agricultural system has failed us in many different ways, not only in providing us with nutritious food, but also in staying in line with the planetary boundaries, which I'm sure you have all heard about. Agriculture is currently responsible for 24% of all greenhouse gas emissions, and it's responsible for crossing 4 of the 9 planetary boundaries, especially also the biodiversity loss being one of the crucial ones due to a lot of our practices that we currently are using. The good thing is we do have a potential solution with regenerative agriculture. We know already that it really helps with the biodiversity crisis, that it really helps with also water shortages through the sequestration of water in the soil. It helps with CO2 emissions through CO2 sequestration. It helps with adaptation to climate change, and also with quite practical issues that farmers are experiencing in terms of the rising fuel and fertilizer costs, which are many times lower in regenerative agriculture practices. So what are we talking about? When we're talking about regenerative agriculture, we are talking about agriculture which is focusing on building up soil health. As part of that, it reverses erosion, it builds biodiversity, and it captures carbon. And all of these things we already know for a long time. There are papers from Wageningen University from the 80s and 90s already talking about these benefits. However, despite the hype that we have especially experienced in the last 2 years and the many commitments that we have heard from global food corporates on the topic nowadays, we still don't see regenerative agriculture being adopted at scale. Now, I think this is a good point to mention that we, and as climate farmers and me personally, are working in the European context. So everything that I'm saying in this presentation is applicable for the European context. I don't really know what's going on in the rest of the world, but I know that in Europe, we still don't have more than a few thousand farmers practicing regenerative agriculture. We have 10.5 million farmers in the European Union. So if we are now at 0.1%, then that's already quite a lot. And there's still a very long way to go. If we are talking about scaled regenerative agriculture, what do we mean? We believe that what we need to get to is 10% of all European farmland to be under regenerative management, because we have seen that it has an amazing effect when you bring farmers on regenerative farms. Farmers are not impressed by PowerPoint presentations, but they are impressed when they're going on a farm and they're seeing the effects of regenerative agriculture. And we believe that if we have 10%, then we have enough model farms for other farmers to visit. And from there on, we see an avalanche effect because we can see how it actually works in practice. In order to get there, we also believe that we need to recognize that regenerative agriculture makes sense economically. Farmers are first-hand business people. They need to run a profitable farm. And so we need to show that regenerative agriculture is profitable and not only benefiting the planet, but actually also benefiting the farm health and the well-being of the farmer by providing more financial income. How do we get there? We have two ways and two LAs, which is knowledge and finance. On the knowledge side of things, we very much focus on the mindset. Over the last 50 years, farmers have consecutively been pushed to focus exclusively on yield and nothing else. For example, through the Common Agricultural Policy, where you get rewarded based on size of farm and what you're planting, but not really looked at what's going on the farm and what the ecosystem services are. So we are supporting farmers in this mindset shift away from a focus on yield towards a focus on soil health and on checking what are actually the inputs on the direct environment of the farm that I'm in. In terms of adequate financing, we believe that we need to measure what regeneration is taking place, and then we need to pay as society for the regeneration that's going on there. This could be through subsidies, but it could also be through other mechanisms. For example, right now we're also speaking with insurance companies who are to pay major damages to due to flooding. For example, my hometown Geilenkirchen in Western Germany got flooded 2 years ago, and there was 31 billion euros in damages in those floods, which you might remember in Germany and the Netherlands. These floods would not have happened in the same way if we would have healthy soils, which would be absorbing water. So this is one of the many interesting areas that we could be looking into. Among others, also, for example, carbon sequestration and biodiversity increase, which we will later be getting to. So we have been testing a lot, and we've been speaking a lot with farmers, especially in 2020 and in 2021. And since last year, we are actively engaged in 5 key projects, which we believe are bringing most value for farmers and for systems change towards more regenerative practices. The first part is a farm enterprise analysis. So we are sitting down with farmers that are getting in contact with us, and we're helping them to analyze what the current situation on their farm is, what the prediction on the farm would be in terms of impact of climate change, what the profitable parts of the farm are, and which parts of the farm would make most sense to transition towards regenerative agriculture. We do not recommend to transform an entire farm at once, but to start with parts of the farm because it's a step-by-step journey. We're also providing our farmers with a free community because many of the farmers that I visited on my farm tour in 2019 have reported to me that they were very surprised that there's actually other people doing the same thing. I was very surprised that all of these leading regenerative farmers did not know of each other. So we organized a conference where we brought all of them together in the world's only farmers castle in southern Germany. And we are organizing online and offline events for farmers. And we also connect them via WhatsApp. Initially, we tried to do Slack and Mighty Gathering and everything, but it was very hard to get farmers on these platforms, and they love to engage with each other, but they all had WhatsApp and they wanted to stay on WhatsApp. So this is what we're using right now. And here we see a lot of engagement and a lot of support that farmers are giving each other in terms of practices, but also just life in general. Then we got a lot of feedback from our farmers that they want to have support in figuring out what the transition towards regenerative agriculture could look like in their context, but it's very hard to filter who are the ones that can actually help them and that know what they're talking about, and who are the ones which have a fancy website but not much behind it. And that's why we built a farmer-backed consultant agency where all of the consultants are verified by farmers from our community, so that farmers that book a consultant through us know that they actually are booking someone that can really help them, and they can also check with other farmers who that consultant has worked with in the past. Then we're working on something which we call a transition blueprint. Now, the transition towards regenerative agriculture is very context specific, but despite that, there are still certain patterns which you can follow. So what we're looking at is, as we said already, we start with a mindset of the farmer. We look at what is the personal context, who are the different stakeholders, what do the stakeholders want for their personal life balance. Then we look at the farm business context, which are the parts of the farm which can best be improved, which are not profitable. What is the ecological context of the farm? What is the soil type? What are the weather conditions? Then we're making an implementation plan together with our experts, and we match them with other peers. And then we're collecting data on the transition process on a yearly basis and report back to the farmer how the transition is going. In order to do this, we developed our own MRV technology, which is monitoring, reporting, and verification, which is a combination of satellite imagery. Here we're using Sentinel-2, which is a freely available satellite from the European Union, as well as soil analysis, as well as modeling through the help of our academic partners, such as, for example, Wageningen. With this, we have one tool which we're having for farmers to get paid, which is what we call our regeneration credit, where we're essentially measuring the increase in carbon in the soil, the increase in water retention in the soil, the increase in biodiversity, and are also involved in some studies on nutrient density in regenerative agriculture. And all of this we bundle together, and then we match the farmers with corporates in their direct local proximity who want to compensate their CO2 emissions by supporting a farmer in the transition to regenerative agriculture. Here we're very much focusing on the local factor, on re-establishing a relationship between the corporate and the farmer. So we also enable the companies which are buying the credits from a farmer to visit that farm as well, so they can see with their own eyes what's going on the farm. And closing off with some of the farmers which we are working with, such as, for example, Francisco Alves, who is a 700-hectare farmer in southern Portugal, who had a lot of issues with drought. He is doing holistic management now, and he's integrating trees into his farming, and he now has green grass in June, which has before been unheard of in his regions. And this is some of the practices which he's having, such as keyline design, the multi-species agroforestry system, and also an olive and almond grove that he's planting together with us on 30 hectares of the farm. Another farmer is Benetriz Ganadera, who's a 400-hectare farmer in southern Spain. And this is a very interesting one because we see that women are one of the driving forces in regenerative agriculture. Traditionally, there's less than 10% female farmers in agriculture. In regenerative agriculture, we see this number substantially higher, and we see many women who are taking over the farm of their parents as the first women in their family history, and then taking it on the regenerative path. So is also the case with Beatrice, who is the fourth generation and the first female farmer who's running the farm there. She is also establishing holistic grazing, and there's a multi-species grazing system here where she's combining essentially sheep, goats, and cows, as it would also happen in nature. And then last but not least, we have Juan Manuel from Alcano Quilo, who's also from southern Spain, who is an arable crop farmer who is with us also integrating animals on the farm and especially establishing better water systems, which he's financing through the regeneration credits. He's currently working on building a lagoon on his farm in order to have a natural way of increasing his own water storage capacity. He's doing no-till and direct seeding practices and also integrating multi-species grazing systems. And if you are curious now, you can just go to Climate Farmers, or you can find me on LinkedIn, and you can get in touch if you are interested in either supporting farmers in the supply chain and transitioning to regenerative agriculture, or supporting some of our farmers by purchasing our regeneration credits from them. Looking forward to hear from you and wishing you a great conference.
Thank you, Philip, and thank you, Climate Farmers, for all the work you are doing to help facilitate the transition to regenerative agriculture here in Europe.
So what we would love to do is actually make ponds in the field, so like big ponds that also gigantically increase biodiversity. So it's a fantastic thing to have in your field anyway, and somehow come up with a system to store the water that the ponds capture in autumn and winter when it actually rains, and use that water again in the garden in spring and summer. I was actually always sort of wrestling with the divide between nature and culture that we make in our society. And I wanted to study biology and art at the same time. It was not allowed by the exam committee of the university. And I always had the feeling that this split is something we should somehow come to a new ways of living together with non-humans, plants, animals, microbes, and have a sort of fundamental different society. And how can we actually tackle issues that are so urgent right now, climate change, biodiversity loss, but also a loss of community at the same time. And when I was looking into that together with my partner, Ricardo Cano Mateo, Spanish biologist, we sort of figured out that the way to come to a human and nature inclusive landscape that could actually address all those issues is regenerative farming. The agricultural plots that we have now are sort of lost plots, I would say. They're completely made for fossil fuel agriculture, which means that you can only come there 10 times a year. You plow, you mow, you spray, you harvest and you go home, but you're not bound anymore to the ground. And for this kind of agriculture, you need to be there. So we were really looking for a place where we had to trust that we could be here long term. And we found that here in this specific plot, we're at the estate of Grootstal, because the Baroness who actually owns this plot is also a transition coach. So she immediately understood what our farm was about.
She's a real baroness.
Yeah, she's a real baroness. Yeah. She lives over there in a real baroness house. Yeah. This was still grass field in April. So lots of work. But the market garden it's really amazing how fast you can actually build a quality market garden with just the simple ingredients of compost, wood chips, and just embracing all kinds of life. And then it goes really fast. Our soil life is now really thriving. My plants, I mean, it's the end of October and they're still growing. So yeah, that has been amazing. Putting up the water system too late, that was really challenging because we especially had already a very dry spring and of course very dry summer. So the water system was not in place, I think until June fully. That was super challenging. Yeah, because that meant like 2 hours extra of work watering the garden. Yeah, we are also working with another entrepreneur who has cows, and he grazes the nature areas. And he is collaborating with us. I call it like lease cows. So he comes in, he grazes our field, and sort of in exchange for part of the lease, and then he can leave the cows for as long as the holistic grazing allows for it. So that gives us the input for the cows, which is wonderful. But we have a plot of 5 hectares, so you cannot have cows there permanently. So we have our chickens permanently, and the cows come in and out. So what we would love to do is actually make ponds in the fields, so like big ponds that also gigantically increase biodiversity. So it's a fantastic thing to have in your field anyway. And somehow come up with a system to store the water that the ponds capture in autumn and winter when it actually rains, and use that water again in the garden in spring and summer. So how can we come up with a system that we can actually store the water from the ponds in some kind of prototype? Perhaps it could work as a regenerative prototype for a lot more farmers, and water the garden with that without disturbing the pond in the most crucial months in spring, in which, for of course, amphibians and for a lot of other species, it's an essential habitat. That would be great, yeah. I think we need to come up with a solution for the water issue, because it's a very urgent issue, and I really believe if we do nothing about it, then they might even put in a stop on the pumping, which would be disastrous.
We want to create a resilient forest garden, basically, which is has an integrated market garden, which is more efficient in a way, and then the forest garden has more a long-term goal of creating fertility over a longer time, storing water, creating shade, and
we're actually farming about 1/3 of what we could farm here. So we would like to regenerate that part of the land.
I studied cinematography in Holland, and that was before 2006 already. And then in 2006 I decided to come to Portugal. I realized that I wanted to do something more with ecology, so I wanted to use those skills that I had developed for making documentaries and something that was more into ecology.
And I studied nutrition, so I was already into food and into healthy food, but I definitely felt that I didn't know enough about where food came from and how it was produced and how that had influence on our health as well.
I think in 2011 we really seriously got to doing that, making a documentary about Ernst Götsch, who inspired us immensely.
We spent 15 days with Ernst Götsch, which was amazing and changed our life. So we after a few days we put our camera on the tripod and we decided to really go hands-on.
I think what we have learned, besides the fact that this is a Mediterranean climate and has very hot summers,
Yes.
so we will need always a lot of water.
Yeah, I mean there's like 4 or 5 months without rain sometimes.
Yes, yeah. We want to create a resilient forest garden basically, which is has an integrated market garden, which is more efficient in a way, and then the forest garden has more a long-term goal of
Yes.
creating fertility over a longer time, storing water, creating shade, and
We're actually farming about 1/3 of what we could farm here, so we would like to regenerate that part of the land. It needs obviously quite an investment for the labor and for the compost and seeds and plants and trees and tools that we need and water, irrigation, all those things to set up that part of the
Yes.
land. Yes.
I think our farming is really based on these permaculture principles where diversity is key. So I think the goals for the future for Lugar da Terra and our little family is to make a very nice diversified homestead with a lot of different angles where people can learn, where people can come and experience how food is being produced on a sustainable way, how the soil can be treated differently, and how we can create soils that are more rich in carbon and more rich in organic matter over time. This is essential to new farming and to regenerate land.
Yeah, definitely.
We want to go on with definitely planting more trees in the next years. We have kind of a sponsorship model for fruit trees and nut trees. So yeah, people can support us so that we can buy the trees and manage them, because the management is really important and it's often forgotten and costs a lot of money and time.
So it would be like adopting a tree basically.
Yeah. I studied organic farming in a small university near Berlin, and I kind of specialized in agroforestry doing that, so I wrote my both thesis, the bachelor's and the master's, in this topic field. And I had a lot of time during the studies to kind of look outside the box. So we went traveling a lot and gain experience on different farms and different conditions. And I was more and more impressed by alternative systems like permaculture, agroecology, agroforestry, regenerative agriculture. And then when we started the farm, it was more or less clear that we kind of work in that field. The farm more or less found us and we found the farm, because the land is owned by the church and they were looking for people set up an organic farm and take care about the land. And that was exactly what we wanted at that point. So we got together and it started.
Sounds very easy going.
Yeah, well, it sounds pretty easy going, but it took quite a long time to get all the regulations done. So we started more or less without any contracts for 2.5 years, 3 years more or less, until we got the contracts for the farm place. But then everything went fine. Well, yeah, one of the biggest learnings I would say is that the day has only like 24 hours, and there's really a lot of stuff to do when you set up with different branches. So when you have a market garden, you have all of the land, you have tickets. We have overtook an abandoned place, so we had a lot of construction going, all of that. Yeah, so the operating principle more or less learned what it means then. Yeah, well, we want to go on developing the farm holistically. So we see it as kind of an organism. So we want to go on with definitely planting more trees in the next years. To implement the agroforestry system. Planting trees there. One of the main plans for the next years. Yeah, I think the biggest thing is really to finance the trees, so that we have kind of a sponsorship model for fruit trees and nut trees. So yeah, people can support us so that we can buy costs a lot of money and time.
So it would be like adopting a tree, basically.
Yeah.
What we are trying to do here is to make the farm better and more efficient on the same surface. We want to be even more independent from the company where we sell transplants from. Temperature and humidity, we have to be able to control it better. We are thinking about some kind of passive solar greenhouse system. With 3,000 or 4,000 euros, we can do this. Yeah. I basically started really small. I had a sort of a vegetable garden project with my brother. I was mainly into the vegetable growing itself and started some research on that field. And so I stumbled upon guys like Jean-Martin Fortier and Elliot Coleman and Curtis Stone on YouTube. They were basically about intensive organic farming on a real small acreage. So that fitted into my context. And that was the starting point for me to experiment. The region around Ghent was known for its ornamental flowers growing, and they were mostly grown in heated greenhouses, but at a certain point it wasn't viable anymore to heat these greenhouses. So there are a lot of greenhouses abandoned or not really in use anymore. They are a bit old, but the basic structure of these greenhouses is perfect for non-heated organic vegetable growing year-round. We found it online, and this is a really small plot. The greenhouse seems big, but the plot itself is like a half hectare. So I think most farmers who were thinking about this place, if this could be interesting, were looking for something bigger. But I was already into this intensive farming. I already experimented with that, and I could think this was possible in here. So I was the only one who dared to jump and to do this. We are experimenting with the width between the plants. So often there's still, if the cabbages are really small, for example, there's still like 40 centimeters or half a meter between them, with the possibility to grow something in between that it's much more faster. Yeah, it's trial and error. But if some things fit together, like onions and carrots or leeks and carrots, yeah, it gives you an extra harvest out of the same surface, so it's really cool. I have some examples that work, and I think that the book of La Ferme du Bec et Loin has like 35 possible systems where vegetables grow together. So they already have a large library of things that could work. What we are trying to do here is, in the following years, is to make the farm better and more efficient on the same surface. So if we finish a crop, we try to replant it, then if it's possible the next week or the same day. So this is an always evolving process of making this more efficient. We are already working in the greenhouse, so this is a perfect place to grow the transplants. But we want to be even more independent from the company where we sell transplants from. But then temperature and humidity, we have to be able to control it better. So we are thinking about some kind of passive solar greenhouse system. I think because we can incorporate it in the main greenhouse, we can, with 3,000 or 4,000 euros, we can do this. Yeah.
Cool. Then let's make it happen. Thanks.
Okay.
I really would like to drastically reduce our water consumption here in the producing of vegetables, and therefore I would love to install drip irrigation for big parts of the field, and combine that with a mulch.
My husband and I, we've always been interested into being member of a CSA, but most of the others are a few kilometers far from Hitzacker. And I always thought it doesn't make sense to drive myself once a week for 20 kilometers to then have a low carbon produced vegetable in my basket. And that's why we really wanted to have our CSA here in Hitzacker. Everybody told us that it will be very difficult to find a gardener, and we were lucky to have some interested gardeners to appear and to introduce themselves. And Jonas said he's somewhere in France and he's looking where he wants to settle down, and we thought, okay, maybe he wouldn't call again. And then he called next. He was already in Hitzacker because he was watching for a flat.
Yeah, it was basically like that. After my 4 years training in biodynamic agriculture, I took like 1 year off to roam around a bit and see what life's like without farming. And then at some point I was on my way back from Portugal already when I somehow bumped into this work offer of the CSA here in Hitzacker, and yeah, that's when I immediately felt like this resonance. Yeah, that could be something. And then I called up Juli's husband, and yeah, 10 days later I was in Hitzacker already, and then yeah.
You actually signed your flat contract before you signed our contract.
That's true. That's true.
Very trusting.
This piece of land was already here, and it's always here and not used for more than 15 years. It belongs to a former farm on the other the side of the road, and then it was too small for normal agricultural usage, and it was too much in the city as well, and that was perfect for us actually.
We are in our first season. We started the planning in January only. I came in December, we started in January, and then we had 45 members, 45 shares already in February, and now we are at the kind of end of our first season with 65 shares. We're supplying 65 households with veggies.
We will see. We know from other CSAs or from people who went off from these CSAs that they sometimes said, okay, it's too big, I don't know the others anymore, or I don't feel that this is a community. And also we have this land, and we're very proud that 1/3, I think, of all the members we have walking distance to this area to get their vegetable once a week.
We harvest for the members once a week. They come here to the field to pick up their box. And there are some veggies that are abundant, and then sometimes we offer the members also to harvest some stuff for themselves.
We try to keep this 3 hours. We have to pick up the vegetables also as a community institution, and there's also supports in the gardening as well. No?
Yes.
I would really recommend just to start. That's actually, we started with nothing. You couldn't really imagine that it will work. And we said,
it was
okay,
bare
just
land,
dig.
really.
Yeah.
Just brown patch of earth. Yeah.
And we also incorporated all the other farmers here who are not doing biological agriculture to take part of. We try to get a good relationship to them, and I think you really mentioned it very well. That they didn't feel like being taught by us that this is much better what they do, but that they are also a part of agriculture community, even if they have another approach.
Mm-hmm. I really would like to drastically reduce our water consumption here in the producing of vegetables, and therefore I would love to install drip irrigation for big parts of the field, and combine that with a mulch. But you as climate farmers, and maybe as people who can donate for us, maybe you could help us with financing the whole drip irrigation. And yeah.
Do you have a rough idea how much that would cost?
I would say it would be around about €1,000 for big parts of the field, yeah.
And so now we're going to go to Sweden with a very last-minute video that was sent by our friends Jostein Herdvik and Dr. Sophie Gerber from the Global Alliance of Organic Districts that are going to present the work they are doing in the Scandinavian region.
It's a pleasure and an honor to be invited to participate in this version of the People's Food Summit. We are now in Europe. We are in Scandinavia, which is the countries of Norway, Sweden and Finland. And now, specifically, we are in Sweden, close to the city of Stockholm. And Sophie Gerber and myself, Josten Hertvik, we will take you through this event. We will start explaining a little bit of the place we are here at Killebyholm. We will say something about an EU project, Kismet, and then the biodistrict, Sörmland. Then we will speak about Diet for Green Planet, and then we will take you a tour from the farm with the fantastic Friends of Cows to the dairy and where we produce the milk. So this will be travel together with you in the People Food Summit. So Sophie, what could you say about this place, Killebyholm?
Yes, as you might see, we are sitting in one of the greenhouses here at Killebyholm. And Killebyholm is a biodynamic garden and an educational center with vocational training. And it has been since 1974. So there's a long experience in this place for sustainable, regenerative farming and gardening. And it's a very beautiful place with a beautiful park, beautiful growing and greenhouses, and it's close directly to the Baltic Sea. And during the season, the place is full of students studying biodynamic and regenerative gardening and agriculture. And it's also a restaurant making food directly from what is produced here at Killebyholm and at the neighboring farms. And you can also come as a customer and buy these things in a small farm shop.
So you could say is when we talk about this food from local market, it's a zero mileage kind of. Yeah.
It is, and I forgot to say it's also self-sufficient on the inputs, more or less. We have the compost here just behind the greenhouses. The manure comes from the neighboring farm and the cows there, combined with all the local resources here from Killebyholm.
So here we can say we're not only saying the hallelujah, but we are doing it. Huh? We are doing it for real, full scale at Killebyholm. That's good. So now I will tell you a little bit about. We have been so lucky. We have an EU project. That's a project in the Baltic Sea region. So we have some money from the governments in order to do what we would like to do. And this project is called Kismet. I wondered a long time what it was. Didn't you, Sophie? Because is it the abbreviation or something? But what is the meaning of Kismet?
It's actually Turkish for faith.
Oh, this is a very good project, and the name is Faith. So we have kind of, the future in our hands, and we have to take care now because, as we all know, the situation is not so very positive. As Antonio Guterres, the General Secretary of the United Nations, says, we are on a highway to climate help, and we are still on the accelerator. So what we would like to do with like-minded people like you participating in the People's Food Summit, we have to now take the actions and show really another direction. Could we call it, what do we call that innovation? Is it like, we don't want to do business as usual. We would like to do radical.
Yeah, and maybe even disruptive innovation.
What do you mean by disruptive?
By disruptive, I mean that we do something that is not inside the system, but goes beyond the system and creates something new.
So it's not what we try to do. It's not greenwashing. We would like to do some real changes in the world. Like Mahatma Gandhi said, be the change you would like to see in the world. And this is what we would like to do here. We would like to make a model and show a real practical example of what we call radical innovation and what you say, Sophie, disruptive. So we have to do something now, and time is for action. Now, I would like to say a little bit of this, speak about the Kismet project. It's a 3-year project, and the Kismet project tried to look into the challenges of local and regional authorities, how they can change their attitude, how they can change their actions in order to have a truly sustainable food system. And also we include the business sector. So these 3 regional, local authorities and business sector will work together in order to see what we can do for the circular economy and what we can do for the farmers. It's very important for us, Sophie and me, that we make it possible for the farmers to produce what is good both for the soil and also for human beings, for the health, and also taking care of the animals. And not only the farmer, but also farmers' families, Sophie.
Exactly. We are talking about ecological, economical, and social sustainability. So we want to maybe not just create sustainable food systems, but also thriving, good, enjoyable food systems for all people taking part. Those eating, those producing, and everything that's in between.
And also we have a special focus. For example, here in Sweden, and you have to look into your country now, here in Sweden, I think the middle age of a farmer is 58 years. So if we don't do something soon, we don't have any food. I mean, we have to engage young people in farming. And there maybe we have to do some innovation on make a 3D model of sustainability, how we can invite young people with their capacity in the whole food chain, not only farming, but other in the food system. So what about the 3D model? Will you engage in that, Sophie?
Absolutely. When we are talking about the 3D model, we are thinking about new ways of connecting what we today call consumers, those eating food and those producing food and those processing, distributing, cooking food, so that we can find new kind of relationships that are not just linear, but create new ways of being and acting together.
This is what Sophie is saying. It's actually what you think about the 17 development goals from the United Nations. When you see that isolated, nothing will happen. But if you put them together, you can say you can create music. It can be concerted action. And what is happening, what we think will happen, if you put people together and look into the holistic view of all the 17 development goals, we call it concerted actions. And then we should create a new kind of tone in the world, something we can rely on, something that can be a development and not only people. I think some people are scared now. Some people are scared that the environment is not very good. We have in the world now, we have heat waves and we have rain and we have extreme weather. So I think people are scared. So we need to put into the world now practical examples that gives a new direction for human integration in nature. So this is what we try to do in Kismet. I mean, it's a project, but as we see it, being together with all of you all around the world, it's not a project any longer. It must be a lifestyle that we look into humanity 3.0. What is humanity in the future? We would like to do that. So in this Kismet project, we have partners from countries around the Baltic Sea. And here you can see the Baltic Sea. There are about 11 countries surrounding the Baltic Sea. And many of these countries are now involved in this Kismet project, 3 years project, in order to create examples of the world we are looking at. And now, Sophie, this is yours.
Yeah, we want to tell you a little bit more about our part in this project, which is actually piloting the first bio-district in the Nordic and Baltic countries. As you might know, the organic district or bio-district movement is a global movement. It's all around the world, started in Italy, and this is for the first time that we are creating something like this in Sweden and the Nordic countries and the Baltic region. And we have decided to do this in what we call Sörmland. Sörmland is a region that includes parts of Stockholm, which is the capital of Sweden, but also several smaller cities and a lot of farmland. Pretty diversified farmland, although it's dominated by cereal production. The challenge here is that since we are very much in the north, we have a very short season. So we have to produce a lot in a few months of the year, and then we have to eat in a way that we can live from these few months all over the year, with some exchange, of course, with you in the rest of the world. But if we want to look at what kind of resources do we have in our landscape in Sörmland, we have to think differently in the way we take care of the land, in the way we handle the land, and also in the way we eat and consume. So what this bio-district is trying to do now is to connect people who are active in different ways in this area. Connect different kind of actors who are interested in the development of a sustainable food system, in a transition to organic regenerative farming and consumption, and find together new ways of organizing the food system. So we are connecting primary producers, farmers, gardeners, processors, distributors, municipalities. In Sweden, we have this, you will talk more about this, Jostein, but in Sweden, we have this peculiar thing that all school children have a free warm meal each day in schools. And this is organized by the municipalities. So if we can include all the municipalities in this region, serving all the school children in Sweden a meal 5 days a week, and get them involved in the transition to healthy and sustainable food, we have already come a long way. So one important part of this project is to involve also the municipalities and their kitchens.
What will you say, Sophie? We are now here we are now in Scandinavia, in Sweden, very close to the North Pole. So, but we still have okay weather now. But in kind of end of October, November, it will be cold and a bit dark. But what would you say? What is the percentage of first of all, agricultural land organic here in this area?
In this area, about 20% of the land is grown organically.
And what about, we talk about municipalities and consumption of organic food. How much is that approximately in this area?
It depends very much on which municipality, because they have the municipalities are very autonomous. But we have one municipality in which we are right now, Södertälje. They have about 70% organic food in their school meals. And then we have municipalities who are very low, and most of them, I would say, are somewhere in between, maybe around 40% organic food.
But we can say that in Sweden, the aim is within 2030 to have 30% organic land. And when it comes to public meals, 60% within 2060. So they are actually looking, and it's up to us to do it. I mean, we have to involve people in order to have this to happen. So, and you say that we are including people here, but how do we do that?
Okay, we are doing this in different ways. We started with the farmers and the gardeners, and started to create working groups, because it's a huge area and we are addressing a lot of different kind of actors. And we decided, let's start with the primary producers. Let's start with the base of food production. So we first invited organic farmers and gardeners to a meeting where we together formulated what are the challenges of today's food system in general in Sweden and in this area, and where would we like to be? What are our goals and how are we going to get there? So this was the first group of people we involved. We are also involving people from gastronomy, working with food culture, both public meals, but also out of house restaurants and kitchens. Then we have one working group working with social inclusiveness, integrating people who are unemployed, maybe have disabilities, immigrants and things like that. How can they be integrated in a sustainable food system in a good way? We have one working group working with the availability of food. How is the food going to come from the primary producer to the consumer? How is it going to be processed, distributed, and end up at the consumers in a way that it is still of high quality, it is healthy, and it is affordable for the consumer, but still gives enough money for the farmer to live a good life?
I think this is just fantastic, and we are involved in this international network of ecoregions or biodistricts, and we are so happy to have friends all over the world. And for us, organic district, biodistrict is a modern way of organizing democracy and putting food and people in the center. Because we have the challenges of biodiversity loss, we have the challenges of climate, we have the challenges of public health. People are not getting the food they deserve. And also, because of some crisis in close related countries here, we have food sufficiency. How can we secure food for people in our municipalities? We saw that in one municipality, if something happened, we had only food for 3 days. We have to look into this. We have to do local food for local markets. And if we need to import, we would like to import from you. We would like cacao from friends that have an organic district or people that have a regenerative agriculture. Bananas, all these things we cannot produce here. Then we need to have a new system of international trade. We have to break the big companies' role, and so we do something for the people with good food. So, as Sophie mentioned, we have a concept of we call it Diet for a Green Planet. And the inspiration for this concept is the book of Frances Moore Lapierre. It was in the 17th. She called it Diet for a Small Planet. And she was the first, actually, author that presented this figure to say that if we should live sustainable and if you should take care of the resources in an effective way, we need to look into the food we eat. So that we need to reduce the unnecessary meat consumption. And maybe we have to eat more whole grain and more cereals. And here you can see the staple here, what energy we use when you produce 1 kilo of beef, and what energy you use if you produce 1 kilo of cereals. We are not saying at all that you should not have animals and eat meat, but we have to reduce the amount and the unnecessary meat, and not to speak about, we have to look into animal welfare. So the food we eat, or the meat we eat, should come from farms that take care of the animals. Here in Sweden, for example, we eat per capita something like 60 kilos meat every year. In Denmark, they eat 120 kilos per capita. In the US, 140 kilos. In India, 7 kilos. So we have to see how we can reduce unnecessary meat consumption in our society. And this is kind of the background for what we call Diet for a Green Planet. And Södertälje municipality, which is the municipality we sit now, we have a lot of like-minded people that serve 15,000 meals every day, according to the concept of Diet for a Green Planet. They have 90 kitchens. And the point with the kitchen is that they are fully sufficient. They produce the food from start. Not doing this with the scissors and just warming. They do it from the start with the ingredients. It's a very good concept. And there are about 200 people working in the diet unit. 70% is organic. This is a fantastic figure. 70% of all food served at school is organic. And not at all, no increased cost per unit. It's the same price as conventional, because they have thought about the holistic system, taking from seasons, reducing unnecessary products. And this is now the criteria of Diet for a Green Planet. It should be tasty and nutritious. You cannot offer food that tastes bad. So you have to see that this is good food. Organic and from ecological regenerative agriculture. And one of the examples of organic regenerative agriculture is Demeter. Demeter is what is it in international
certification for regenerative farming.
Yeah, so this is in fact the only international certification, I think, for organic.
At least on a global scale, yes.
Yeah. And it's not only that they certify farms, but they also certify processors. So, and we will see that later in the program with how we treat the milk, with where we treat the milk carefully. So then regional products, and this is the core of the Kismet project, local food for local market, and seasonal products. I mean, you maybe you don't have seasons, but here in Scandinavia we have 4 seasons. In the countries you have just 2 seasons, wet seasons and dry season. But here in Scandinavia we have these 4 seasons. And then very important, balanced diet, vegetables and whole grain meat. And not at all reduction of food waste. And there we have other issues than you have in other countries. We have issues that people throw away food after eating. But in other countries you have what we call post-farm gate, that you don't have storage facilities, you cannot cool it down, you lose a lot of product here. But here in Scandinavia, we have a fairly good system for storage, so that here our problem is that we throw away too much food. And this is I think it's a very, we invite all the network to join the global movement of Diet for a Green Planet. And you think that is a good idea, Sophie?
I think it's a splendid idea, because the good news is that what is good for the planet is also good for human beings. So it's healthy for our planet and it's healthy for those eating it. And I think when we look at how it's working here, it's very interesting that this is working with school children. So we start actually with the future. We start with those who are going to eat in the future, and it's also a cultural task to make children eat what is good for them and what is good for the planet, and find this good and tasty as well.
And we, Sophia and me, we have been in many of these school restaurants, and what I think is good, it's a social issue, that they really have chefs, professional people that make food at the kitchen. And you can see they are smiling. So it's not only that we do the food according to Diet for Green Planet, but we look after the people who's doing it, that they have a good time producing good food for the children with a smile. I think that in the organic movement, we should always remember the smile. We have to have humor, we have to enjoy life with good products and take care. So thank you very much. This was an introduction from Sophia and me, and then in the next session, we will look into how we produce milk. I mean, we will go to the farm, Yttre Eneby farm, then we will go to Järna Mejeri, and then we will see how the milk is distributed as a social initiative. So good to be with you all. We are one world in one planet, one people. Thank you.
Thank you.
So this is milk. But where does it actually come from? Milk comes from cows. This is our friends who produce this fantastic drink. So I will now take you into a story from the cow to the barn, to the dairy, and out as it comes like this in a glass of milk. So it all starts at Yttre Eneby farm in Järna, where they grow biodynamic. Biodynamic is that you grow in respect of nature, in respect of human beings, and a circulation agriculture. So from there, it goes into a tank, and from the tank, it goes into the dairy. And in the dairy, it's a very gentle process, very little pumping, and it's only pasteurized, not homogenized. So this is a very interesting story, and we need to take care of the cows, of nature, and the product that human beings should get in order to be healthy. So let food be your medicine, and medicine be your food. Welcome. Thank you.
Hello Max, now we are at Yttre Eneby gård, Yttre Eneby farm. Who are you?
I'm Max Geiger, a farmer here in Järna, Yttre Eneby. Biodynamic farmer.
And what would you say, what is the difference between your cows and other cows and how you work with them?
I would say the big difference is they still have their horns left. And we are not feeding them any power feed, so they only get fed grass. And we have a pretty unusual race, and that's brown Swiss. It have higher fat, higher protein in the milk, and yeah, the milk tastes better.
Great, thank you, Max.
We pick up the milk from the goat and we pump that to the mottagningstank, tank, receiving tank, upstairs. Only once we pump. And then from upstairs to the pasteurizer, the milk free fall and without pumping. And then the pasteurized pump, it manages the level of the product pasteurized according to the speed of the pasteurization. So the milk is pasteurized at minimum temperature of 72 degrees. If the temperature is low, then it's the automatic valve goes open. The milk come back to the balanced state. So then is we have 100% sure about the pasteurized milk is good at temperature. So when during pasteurization, the milk, the third phase, the milk is cooled down to 4 degrees and stored in a storage tank, also upstairs. The same flow of the pasteurization pump, it goes upstairs, and there is a storage tank. And after that, when we finish pasteurization, it's a filling process. In the filling process, also you open the tank valve, and it free fall come to the filling machine downstairs. Then there is also no pump in only twice. When the Mutagning tank, there is a pump, that is a safe pump. It will not damage the product. And the pasteurizer pump, it is the pump, it is a centrifugal pump. It is internationally used. We cannot change that. But for a low speed, it is okay for a product. We never have any problem with that. Yeah. And our product is safe with a low temperature and low or almost no mechanical damages on the milk or other products. That is the pasteurization, 2 degrees. Yeah. If it is a high pasteurization, it is for yogurt products. It is up to 82 degrees. That is also in the dairy world, everyone knows, but normal people, they don't know what the temperature is. Yeah.
So a special thing with this milk and how we provide it to the consumer is that it's given and transported by the Puritan Homes, by social initiatives. It is Klokkagården, it is Nobivelle and Målargården. We transport the milk every week from the dairy and to the consumers. And this is so important because we give these people very good job, they like it, and the consumer really love it when they come to deliver the milk. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh and Sophie. So that's it for us here in Europe. And we're now going to hand it over to our good friend, Precious Piri, who's going to present the African segment. Be well, be happy, and take care.